Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. We want you to remember that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and you are fully loved by Him.
You have been designed on purpose by God with unique gifts and passions in order to love and lead those around you. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer.
And I'm Esther's co-host, Holly Kane. I'm a wife, mom, and business owner. I also write at hollykane.org, where I focus on my passion for women's ministry.
Together, we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We are so glad you're here with us. Hi, friend. Today, I'm excited to bring you an interview that Holly and I did with my friend Natalie Gingrich, all about how to win people over and communicate positively in the workplace. In this conversation, you will hear us discuss some of Natalie's leadership journey, as well as some common mistakes that leaders make in communication. We're also talking about dealing with conflict in the work environment, as well as how communication affects things like hiring, firing, and developing teams. Now, even if you are not someone who holds a leadership role in the corporate workplace or as a leader of your own business, I think there will still be something for you in this episode. One of the reasons is because Natalie brings up two important keys to communication that are vital for every single one of us, and they may be things you haven't actually thought about. See if you can identify those two keys as you listen along. Now, I could read you Natalie's official bio at this point, but you can check that out in the show notes. I would rather give you a little bit more personal introduction. You see, Natalie and I met because she responded to an email I sent out to my list several years ago. We hopped on a phone call to chat, and we ended up connecting. We soon became friends on Facebook, and then later, Natalie joined a mastermind I was running, and further down the road, she ended up becoming a client of mine in my Morningstar Media Services business. Natalie has been a lifeline for me, especially when it comes to business, but even more than that, she has become one of my dearest friends. I'm so grateful for her and her expertise and her willingness to share with us on the podcast today. I hope that you enjoy it as much as I did. And I would encourage you to be thinking about something that you hear her share that you can put into action in your own leadership role. So let's go ahead and dive into our conversation with Natalie. Welcome, friend, to today's episode of the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. Today, I am sitting down with my co-host, Holly, and our guest, Natalie Gingrich. Welcome to the show, Natalie.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here. We've been talking podcast and we've been friends for so long that it's my honor to be here.
Yes. And it's so funny because we work together and talk to each other probably on a daily basis. And it has taken us over a year to coordinate having you on the podcast. So
three busy women.
Yeah. All right. Well, today we are continuing our series in communication. And so I wanted to bring you on to talk to you about one of your areas of expertise, which is handling tough conversations in the workplace, including dealing with things like hiring and firing, because you have played a role in corporate settings and in the entrepreneurial space. And I think you can bring a lot of insight into this issue of communication. So before we get into all of that, though, I'd love to just start with a little bit more context about you for anyone who is listening who doesn't know who you are. Could you share with us a little bit about your leadership role currently and what you're doing in your life right now?
Awesome. Thank you. So I will say I'm a natural born leader. I have always had a leadership role, and I can literally remember leadership showing up for me very early in my life. And it's one of those things that I have always just pulled with me. Part of it's a gift, and part of it is just the continual exploration that I have pulled together and developed as I've gotten older. Today, I would say leadership is all around me and it continues to be that way, but I feel a really strong pulling and calling, I should say. I feel a really strong calling to show up for other females. And so I am leading from the front and helping other women to be their own boss, to be the boss of their homes, to, run businesses and also do that in a really authentic way. And it's a little bit different than other people because yes, we all hustle from a business perspective. We all hustle and those words mean something differently to everybody. But I really feel that the leadership piece of me, my gift in leadership, is to help women understand and write their own path of leadership in their own lives, even if they're natural born or not. I really don't think that matters long term. The most important thing for us as being women of God, women of character, is really understanding who it is that we want to be, quote unquote, when we grow up, and then cultivating that for ourselves. And so I take it as a huge responsibility to just really play a great listener role and be empathic and understanding where women want to go and helping them to create the space to do that. And it's going to look different for everybody.
Yeah. And you have a business called The Ops Authority and a podcast. It's called The Ops Authority. So go check that out if you're a woman in business. But can you tell us just quickly about your certification? Because I know that's a big way that you are leading right now. And just share with our listeners what you do in that.
Yes. So my business is built around helping other females to create a business that can support other people. So I'm always looking for people who have an operational and administrative skill set. That sounds super dorky and technical and maybe even a little bit corporate, but I'm looking for people who are great right-hand people. Right-hand women, we'll say. Mm-hmm. And I am training them on really finite disciplines, which have a deep impact in business. So we're looking at finance, we're looking at processes, we're looking at building teams, at nurturing teams. We do a lot of work around the talent development. So bringing in the right people, which I'm sure we're going to explore today, mm-hmm. but bringing in the right people and then making sure that that culturally you have what they want. And it's not a top down type of role. So the certification is set up to give women this opportunity who already have the ability. I'm just showing them the way that I have been able to walk through this and use my experience from corporate, from, my past lives and how I've done this with excellence in the entrepreneurial space.
I love how you've taken what you were doing yourself and transformed it into something that you can teach others to do. I just really think that is such a leadership quality, is bringing people right along with you and supporting them in their journey. So I really appreciate that. So you talk about the fact that you really feel like you were a natural born leader. Was that something you always innately knew? Or was there a point where you had sort of that aha realization moment? And I would love to know where that kind of fell in your journey as a leader.
Absolutely. I 100% am pretty passionate about me being a natural born leader. Both my sister and I mean, we grew up with a single mother, and my sister and I were both natural born leaders. I think that my mother probably cultivated some of that because she also is. So, these are long skill sets. We come from a long line of leadership, and I'm sure part of it's learned and part of it's embellished by being surrounded by people. But the high achieving part of me, which not all leaders have to be high achieving. So, but for me in my space, one of my greatest drivers for leadership has always been in that high, in that ambitious piece. So the beauty of having a mother who modeled this for me is I was always surrounding myself with people who were leaders, right? Who wanted to be around strong personalities and confident people. So I just feel like I don't feel like there's a single moment that I can turn around and look back and say, this is what clicked and this is when I saw myself as a leader. I feel like I've just gotten stronger and, as they say, wiser as I've grown older, but also just realizing that I do have a gift. I think that if anything, if I could look back and see, instead of saying like, this is the moment I became a leader, there are certainly some really pivotal moments in my life where I can see where my leadership was enhanced. But the learnings that I have had over time, they just keep layering on top of one another. And then the more I get to know myself, the better able and equipped I am to show up for other people.
Mm. So you mentioned some pivotal moments for you in your leadership journey. So would you mind sharing a few of those and what those have been to get you to where you are now?
Sure. So I've always had a leadership role in like extracurricular activities. And so I can remember just facing challenges. And as a young child, I say child, I felt like I was a big girl back then, but in the high school space, like even with student government and student council and being a leader and being, an officer at those times, I know today, like I haven't thought about this. You just asking me this is making me dig into that. But there were moments where, I was with my peers. A lot of, I was representing my peers and I took that very seriously. And at the same time, I was having to make some really hard decisions. And so that decision, that confidence to be able to say, I'm going to elect or select or vote to go this way, even though it may not represent everybody, having that confidence and that belief. And I believe that a lot of my leadership comes down to ethics and, having a really strong ethical, being able to like fight for my right, if you will, but without the fight, but just being really, really strong in what I believe in and letting that be my compass for decision making the confidence along with that strength in the decision making that has been the struggle because of course you want to be accepted. You want to lead. I have always wanted to lead as I wanted to be the leader that somebody would want to follow, not the prescriptive, demanding, commanding type of leader. And I do have to work on that, by the way, because I do have a very strong personality, but those life moments where you've got people opposing your opinion, no one's necessarily right or wrong. A lot of these things are opinions. And so having the fortitude to stand in that and still make a wise decision on behalf of other people too.
Yeah, so you kind of made a nod to it when you were talking about sort of, maybe that internal compass or what you believe in. But how has faith played a role in that leadership over time?
Absolutely, in the form of values. So faith has always been a part of my life. I feel lucky. The more people I talk to, I'm getting to understand that what I thought was normal is not necessarily normal in everyone's life. So I feel very fortunate to have grown up this way. But the faith component brought different values that separated me from other people. Right. And I don't want this to be misconstrued that if you don't have faith or if you didn't grow up in a Christian home or anything like that, that you don't have that compass. That's not what I'm saying. For me, in my own experience, I know that that is what helped cultivate my mom to raise me in the way that she did. And it's the same thing that's, those ethics, those boundaries, that belief, that hope, the mercy. All of that is what's leading me to show my kids and develop my kids in their own way too. So faith it's everything to me. It's the backbone. It is truly the absolute spine to the way that I live. And I feel very fortunate to have been given that and be able to have the gift to be able to share it again.
I know one of the things we have talked about a lot, Natalie, you and I, is when we are faced with decisions in our businesses. And I often will turn to you when I need advice. And you always bring me back to values. Like, where does that line up with your values? And it's always been so helpful to me to look at it through that lens. So I appreciate your insight on that.
I agree. Values are huge. I had no idea, Esther, you just bringing that up right now. I have always been I've always been grounded in values, always. And I don't know if that's, if that comes from my childhood or if it's something that I learned over time, but I can remember making decisions based on values literally very, very young in life. And I feel like when I do have those tough decisions and the faith question that Holly and I were just discussing, it really does come back to values for me. And it's how I help lead people in general. And your values don't have to be my values. I just want you again, getting back to that very beginning part where it's like, I want you to build the business that you want today. Where are your values? Because I know that if we select a path that rubs against the values that we have set for ourselves and likely that you pride yourselves on, it's going to be a very hard trek. And you can see this not only in business, but in your home, in selecting a mate, in selecting a church, in selecting, your closest friend circle, right? Your inner friend circle likely has similar values and beliefs as you. That next ring and the next ring, there's something that's a little bit different. And if you really take the time to pull this back, it's values. They have something a little bit different than you. And it's okay. They're still your friends. They're just not in your tightest circle. But values are so huge. I had no idea that values were going to shape my career as well, because I think that I have selected positions in corporate based on values or based on the leader or the difference of values of where I was going to go. I have not taken opportunities because while the position or the title or the money was interesting and exciting, the person who was going to be leading me had a value set that I couldn't get behind. And, it takes a lot of internal strength and faith to really make those decisions, because I knew I would be well supported if I made that hard decision. So,
Yeah. Yes. So good. So good. So, Natalie, we didn't talk specifically about what you did in corporate before, but if you want to share a little bit about that, you can. But I know that in your corporate experience and then also in your entrepreneurial journey, you have held roles in organizations and teams where you have been overseeing large teams, multiple people. You have done hiring and firing and managed a lot of challenging situations in the workplace. So, like I said at the beginning, as part of this communication series, we wanted to talk with you about your experience, about recommendations for handling communication as a leader in our workplaces. And I think this will apply for people that are also working in ministry situations, although I know sometimes it's different because you're managing volunteers and not employees in a lot of those cases. But what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that leaders make when it comes to communicating with their team members?
not having a really good understanding of who they're talking to. I think leadership in general just takes a lot of patience. And impatient leaders, it's like an oxymoron to put those two things together, but you have to get to know people for you to be able to be an effective communicator and a good leader, a good steward of your mission, whatever that may be, whether that's in church, home, or work. You have to understand who you're speaking to. And getting to know people has always been my secret sauce in being an amazing manager. I will say that about my own self. Like, I love people. I love different kinds of people, but I also love getting to know them. It makes my job as a leader for them so much easier. As a mentor, as a peer, asking for favors, being vulnerable, all of those things. If I can get to know them, the conversation just rolls. It's not like a top-down conversation. It's like us going to a coffee shop and having coffee versus me being behind the desk and them being across the desk from me. And so I just feel like the biggest mistake is really in not being really, I don't love the word authentic, but not being true to yourself and getting to know that person. Because I do feel like fundamentally humans want to get to know humans. We put up barriers to protect ourselves. We enable ourselves to show up as other people that are not ourselves. And so delivering a message that isn't yours is always going to be very difficult.
I love that. Such a good perspective on managing teams, because I think a lot of leaders forget that they need to get to know who they're working with. They just see the role and see maybe who they feel they have to be, but figuring out who you're actually leading and who you are guiding and what they need from you and what you need from them is huge. So, yeah. So one of the biggest challenges that I've seen in teams is miscommunication, and it can really lead you down some crazy paths if you let it go too far. So I'm wondering what some of your recommendations are for leaders to be able to avoid miscommunicating with their teams, maybe some tools, best practices, guiding principles, that sort of thing.
I love this stuff. This is like, I'm going to tell you guys, I'm going to put my dorky hat on for a second, but miscommunication is, or communication in general, is like, it should be top dog in your life because we as humans have to communicate, and we're going to do that non-verbally. We're going to do that verbally. Today, we're doing it in text. We're doing it in emojis. Like, we are doing this and we have so many outlets to do this. But when we're talking specifically about a team, and whether that's at the church or in your work, which could be one and the same for your audience, the miscommunication happens when you don't know how somebody learns or wants to be talked to. Again, this is depth in relationships. So is this person, and there are even tools out there for this, but is this person an auditory learner? Do they need to verbally process? And, there are tools for that. Esther and I use them all the time. And one of the tools that we use is Voxer. It allows me to be able to verbally communicate what's going on. She can give me a list all day long, but I'm going to actually take action on something if I can talk about it. I can get ideas and inspiration. That's what really, really helps me. And then there are people who really want facts. They want facts. They want, they want the background. They want the data. They want that list, or they want the email. They want the quote unquote trail. And people feel like this written trail is a really negative thing. It's not. It may be negative for you because it's annoying to have to recap everything in an email, but somebody on the other end learns best like that. So if you're a leader, you truly need to understand how the people that you are leading need to be led. And if you want to avoid those miscommunications, you're going to have to meet them in the middle. And yes, it may be a little bit extra work for you. I may have to put something in email as well as, sending a Voxer or creating a graph. Like, let's take this out of like task world. But if I'm explaining a concept to a team, and maybe I'm the visionary who has this idea for an event, and the way I want this carried out, and the way I express myself is writing and drawing on a whiteboard. And so I've got this beautiful pictorial, and it means everything to me. Like, everything is out of my head. I've got it all on this whiteboard. But Holly is the person that I need to actually lead the event and execute and find the people and the volunteers to make this happen. But Holly does not understand my drawing. All of a sudden, Holly can't do her job. Now Holly feels like, oh, am I disappointing Natalie? How am I doing? Should I not be doing this? Her self-worth is questioned. Her leadership is questioned. Her relationship with me is questioned. And so if I know that me as a visual person, I want to write this out and draw this and put different colors and make it all pretty, I have to realize that's for me. And I may need to go through that step to get it out of my head. But what does Holly need? Holly needs me to turn this into verbal, maybe, put this into a video or put this into a checklist, whatever that looks like for Holly. If she's the person that has to do that task, I have to meet her where she is. And so all of us are going to have different communication styles. You don't want to put yourself in a situation where, that extra step of writing that email for Holly is just so frustrating. I'm not going to hire any more Hollies, right? Because I'm being selfish in the way that I want to do this. We cannot hire people. We can't build teams and build armies around us of people who are exactly like us. It's so much more beneficial to take the extra step. What is it? 60 seconds, maybe 3 minutes to put into an email to make this work well for everybody. Now, Holly totally appreciates that I've gone the extra step. Holly knows exactly what she needs. And guess what? Holly's not going to come back to me 500 times, ask me questions that I feel like I've already articulated. She's going to have a really strong, certain path, and she's going to outperform.
Yeah.
I love that. So good to remember that, because a lot of times we just assume that if people are underperforming, that it's 100% a problem with them and not a problem with how we're communicating. And when in fact, it really could be a huge chunk of it is how we're communicating our expectations, the job in and of itself. They can't fully comprehend or understand what's going on because they don't learn that way. So,
yes.
Can you speak to the idea of assumptions? I just kind of was thinking about this as you were talking and thinking about leaders, sometimes myself included, making assumptions that someone understands what I meant when I conveyed a message to them. And just like, how can we deal with that issue of not assuming that people are understanding it? Are there any ways that we can make sure that our team is understanding what we're communicating to them?
I think of this with like parenting, right? And I'm not minimizing my response to this, but there are two different ways. And today, just being in the digital world that we're in, assumptions are happening so much more, and blame as a result is happening just as much, which is leading to ego and other things that we don't like. But we have to just be aware. Again, it comes back to that conversation, back to the depth of understanding how these people learn. But the assumptions, the way to protect against assumptions, to me, there's two things that pop in my head right now. One is to have them repeat it back to me. Are you clear? And if I have a really good relationship with you and I ask you, hey, are you good to go? Are you clear on all of this? If we have a good relationship, you're going to tell me yes or no. If we don't have a good partnership together, you may be hesitant to be honest with me. You may be hesitant to be like, oh, I don't want her to get mad at me, or I don't want, I want to make sure that she knows I'm the best person for this role. There are things that we start to impose on ourselves that may not even be true. But if I have a really solid relationship with you, you communicating back to me becomes so much clearer. The other thing is I'm thinking now in the digital world where we've got so many text messages going back and forth and written communication with no visual to accompany that. The assumption is, I feel like people are putting themselves in boxes by being really, really specific, taking some of the emotion out. And people will tell you, like, if you don't want to be misunderstood, take the emotion out, just put the facts out there. And it's absolutely opposite of the way that I think. I feel like the more that you can get to know me as a human and the way I communicate, the longer term we're going to be able to be open with one another. And so the other thing is visually. I mean, those nonverbal cues are everything. I know that even in my, working relationships, if I can be on a video call where I can see somebody nodding or yes or no, or that puzzled look or the glazed look, I'm looking for those cues so that I can make sure that we're connecting. And if not, I have to find a different way to do that because that's my role. It's not just a push down, like this is the way it's going to be. It just will never work that way.
Yeah. So good. So good. So as a leader of a team or an organization, whether you're in corporate workplace or the online business space or church ministry life, we know there's going to be conflict. It comes up all the time, and in our families too, right? I mean, we mentioned leading our kids, and that happens for sure. So what do you think doesn't work when it comes to handling conflict within it? Let's stick to mostly within the workplace, but I'm sure it applies elsewhere too.
As you said that, I went back to when conflict didn't work in my own house. So
well, you can use that as an example if you want.
I'll pass. But thinking about the workplace, and like, to be really, really clear, the conflict in the workplace is going back to that misunderstood, right? Being misunderstood, not taking the time and having the patience. A lot of times we keep things upstairs, and it's not only like communicating, it's how do we effectively communicate, right? We are all different human beings. And so, conflict arises when we have two different beliefs, two different expressions, two different motives. I mean, conflict is always a difference. It's just, if you can look at conflict as a difference versus an argument, it's just two differences. And not putting yourself, I always try to remove myself as the human. And that's very, very difficult because I'm a very empathic human. I love depth and connection. I feel like that's the only place I show up really, really well. If I start to get on that superficial spectrum, I get disconnected, right? I don't feel that. And conflict, so if you think about me and probably you ladies and lots of your listeners, we like the depth, right? If you're into ministry, if you're into Jesus, like, you probably want depth. And so when I'm super deep and somebody conflicts with me, it hurts in a whole different way than on that superficial realm. So if it's something I'm passionate about, whether it's a belief, whether it's a, something I have in my head and someone someone disbelieves or someone challenges it, all of our innate reaction is to protect ourselves, right? To defend it, to say really bold, maybe not even truthful statements to protect ourselves. And so I think that conflict it's good to know it's human. It's good to know. I would prefer that we look at the word difference instead of conflict because I think it feels more gentle. I know if I can say, you know what, we just have a difference right now, I'm going to be able to quote unquote defend myself in a different way than feeling like I'm literally like hiding my children and hiding my ego and hiding, all of these things that come up. If it's just a difference, it's like, yeah, I wanted a cheese sandwich and he wanted a ham sandwich. And if you look at it, like it's not the end of the world. Most of these conflicts are number one, avoidable by communication. But second of all, you can handle them. You can handle them with grace. You can handle them with respect. It's just understanding that these are not life altering, differences and challenges that are coming up.
I really love that. For such a long time, I had such a hard time with confrontation and bringing things up with people. And when I was able to make that, I don't know if I want to use the word disconnect, but when I was able to take myself out of it to some extent and sort of look at it as we're sitting across from each other at a table and there's a problem on the table that we're discussing rather than we're discussing something wrong genuinely with me and my worth, that made such a huge difference. And I was able to handle I was able to handle those confrontations in a much more constructive way. So I love that you mentioned that because it so goes right along with my experience and it's so interesting. But it all comes back to self-awareness and knowing how you communicate with people. So
Mm-hmm. Confrontation is one of those words. Like when you just said that, I was like, oh yes, because confrontation, when we say the word confrontation, I think of and this is just my world, maybe I'm the only person, but I think of two people yelling at one another, right? I feel like confrontation means like a brawl. It's you're mad, you're angry at one another. And really confrontation is just like conflict. It's just a difference. Holly wants to do it this way and Esther wants to do it this way. Neither way are right and neither way are wrong.
Yeah.
You just get to do them differently. And so how do we communicate the gap? How do we fill the gap? It's by knowing the other party, knowing where Esther's heart is or where Holly's heart is and what serves the greater good, not just yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I love that, and I think that it's so great when we talk about this. But I would love if you could give us maybe some more best practices that you'd recommend for leaders handling conflict. Some really practical things, like maybe a core value or something like that would be a guideline as they're handling these situations.
The biggest feather in my cap that I have, besides really getting to know people and not just like checking the box of, yes, I onboarded this person and so now she's on my team. It's like, what are the triggers? What is the joy? What brings this person joy? Like really getting to understand who they are at the core of them, what motivates them. And I'm not talking motivates like money and accolades and all of this. I'm talking about like in our conversations, when does, my teammate let down her guard and become a human with me, right? When do they let down the guard and we get to have real conversations? Even if you're in corporate, like this is one of those taboo things that people did not want to do in corporate, but it was my special sauce. It's why people wanted to be on my team. It's why leaders they wanted to be mentored by me. They wanted that development because it really wasn't judged. I let people just show up in their own values. And so just as much as I believe in knowing your values and the vision for your business, I also believe in having this for yourself, right? For having this for your family. And our family sits together every single New Year's Day and we talk about what is our vision and values for this week. And you know what? We make family decisions based on that, right? We have a family motto of yes, you can, because we come from a long line of being really self-critical. Like I am super self-critical. My children are very high achieving and are very, very critical. My husband is not necessarily as much, but I spend the majority of the time with my children. And so they unfortunately pick that up sometimes. And so that yes, you can motto comes it's my armor when I see them self-deprecating or when I see them not feeling like they're worth. I would take that exact same thing and put it into the workspace or into any relationship that you have. It's not just by knowing that they have those qualities about them, I learn how to fill in the gaps. And this is not just with my kids. This is with every single relationship that is close to me, even people who aren't. I'm always striving to try to understand what the values are behind this person. Because if I can meet them there, even if it's not my strongest value, and I know that it's yours, I can always try to get there, right? Even if they don't have the same beliefs as me, I can still get to the value always, right? And values are like adjectives for those of you guys that are listening that may be thinking like, what is a value? Like one of my biggest values is candor. I love candor. Candor does not have to, and so when I say candor, you may have already jumped to candor means sassy. Candor means being direct. Candid means like harsh reality. That's the negative view. Candor is being really honest. In my opinion, it's being really honest and conveying with kindness. I mean, I love to say that I have a lot of candor. I'm fierce, but not mean. And I'm extremely kind. And if you put all three of those together, those are my values. I want a lot of I really like a really ethical compass in people. If I can see that, even if you believe differently than me, I love when I can see that because I can attach to it. I like to surround myself by people who may not have candor as their value, but they can appreciate my candor. That's when I feel like I'm really able to express myself. That's when dealing with conflict becomes much easier. That's when putting together a circle of people that I feel really confident around. That's what happens.
Mm. So, Natalie, speaking of candor, you in your role as in the Ops Authority, what you've done is you worked as a project manager and then you started becoming chief of staff for other business owners. So you were serving the CEO. You were kind of their right-hand person. And then I know now you train other women to do the same. So that role is often considered kind of like second in command, like you're not the ultimate decision maker for the organization. And that's what I think probably a lot of our listeners are in roles where they're not necessarily the ultimate decision maker in their team, their organization, their church, whatever it is. But they still need to bring up hard issues and sometimes tough conversations with their leader, with the person who is technically over them. So what kind of advice do you have for those kind of conversations when you're not necessarily talking to someone that you're leading, but you are talking to someone who has the ability to fire you if they don't like what you say?
Yep. I believe that I fully believe that there is opportunity even in hard news. So one of the biggest gifts that I use and that I would happily share with you ladies that are listening today. So there is opportunity in every hard conversation, and avoiding the hard conversations is what we want to do. And when you're speaking on behalf of somebody else, it's natural to protect yourself and just be the conduit. And I'm saying that in air quotes because I remember feeling at times like I'm the liaison from the CEO to a, chief marketing officer or a financial officer or, whoever it may be. I felt like I could be a liaison and just like spread the word. And that to me becomes like a telephone game because I'm still putting my emotion into it. Or I can take an independent stance on it and communicate very factually, but with that candor, with empathy and understanding that other person. I know I've said that so many times throughout this interview, but it really is the relationship with the person that you are delivering that message to. And so where I started with the whole opportunity thing is as I'm delivering hard news or strong news, and it may not be like, I want to fire you, but it may be like performance and like what I would call corrective action. Like, here's how you could do this better. Like corrective action sounds awful. Why do we even talk about that in the corporate space? Corrective action? Like, but those were the terms that we would use, right? Performance improvement plan means that you have opportunities to improve. Yes, we all know that, but it still feels really, really negative to us. And so I feel like if you can sit down and have a really good conversation, it all starts with knowing what the motives are of that person. Are we pushing someone to like be into leadership if that's not what they want? And when I say leadership, I don't mean the quality, I mean level or place in an organization. But are we pushing someone in there because they have been the yes person? Because that's probably not the person you want in quote unquote leadership. Do you understand the mission of that person as an individual, even outside of your organization, so that you can then develop plans for them? Because I really feel like even if I've got to deliver a hard message, like they need to improve on this, I would not use those words. I would start talking to them about where their gifts are. Where do you want to be going? How can we develop? How can I be a part of your journey in getting to that destination? All while I've got it in my head that the CEO or the leader doesn't really like the performance of this person. I don't have to go back and tell them they stink at being a greeter, right? Like I don't have to tell them they don't have a good personality or they don't have the desired personality. I can go back and I can tell them like, what is it that you want to be when you grow up? How can I have a hand in making that happen for you? How can I open up opportunities for you to do that? I never have to go down the path of there's a flaw in you, because ultimately we probably put them in the wrong. I said yes to that person, or I lured them into a position that they probably never should have been in.
I really love that perspective because as a person who's done performance reviews with other people and have had to deliver constructive criticism, and I'm using air quotes because it almost never feels constructive. It's a really hard place to be, and that's a really great perspective to kind of hold in your mind while you're having these conversations, that there is opportunity there. And yeah, so I really appreciate that. I would love to dig a little bit more into the hiring and firing side of what we're talking about. How do you think communication plays a role in effectively hiring and firing within your organization?
It begins with understanding exactly what your needs are. And I believe that we oftentimes mishire, which leads to a lot of negativity long term and a lot of strife. But we don't understand what it is that we actually need. We see a person who we think could be who could close the loop for us really quickly. Yeah. I need this person to do this. And you already have a person in mind. If you can back up and remove yourself, and sometimes it takes working with external parties to help you identify what it is, what the role looks like. Don't look at the people or the potential people in your organization right now. Don't look at them. Don't even think this personality would be great here. That's the last thing that's going to help you be successful. Or, we see this a lot of times in corporate. They've been here for a really long time. We should gift them the opportunity to step into a higher level role. Never turns out well. They may not even want that sneaking role, right? So if you can understand and build a description, I'll call it a job description. If you can build that description based on what the outcomes of the role should be, right? So what if you want I'm just going to put this in business terms, but so you want a copywriter who can help you write your emails to your audience every single week. That's an easy role to fill. If I put that out on the internet, I would have lots and lots of applicants to come in. But if I said, here's my values, here's my beliefs, here's what I want done, the outcome is that I'm going to have, 15% of the people who get this are actually going to open it. And I start quantifying things and making it much more tangible. Only the people, you're going to decrease the number of people that are going to say yes to it, right? Because you've made it very, very clear. And you're also going to get the people who match you. This is definitely going to be a process, but you won't rule out every single person who shouldn't be applying, I should say. But I believe that the more that you can communicate up front, the more clear you can be the better the process is going to be, the better the relationship, the longer they're going to stay, the more they're going to be, the more they're going to feel like they want to contribute to your mission or to the mission. It's just better alignment all the way around.
Mm. I think that it happens a lot in the business space, but also in the church space, where we get into a position where we are desperate for that task or that thing to get done, right? So the hiring happens so quickly that we overlook all of those pieces that you just shared about making sure that you're clear and you're communicating about the values, perhaps about the character of the person you want to hire and all of that. And all of a sudden you're just basically filling a role to complete a task. But it backfires a lot of times.
Oh, yes. And speaking of the church space, and I think there's going to be a lot of head nods with this, but I've been voluntold in a church environment so often because I'm so capable of delivering. They know the quality that I have. They know that my output is good. They know that I'm dependable. And so I have been overused in the church space, right? I've been overused in the corporate space too. But I think when you know who those key people are, we as leaders can almost abuse them, right? We start to know that they're a crutch for us. They'll just jump in. And so I say voluntold because that's how it always felt. I could have said no, and I have had to say no, but it's hard when you're in a service, in a ministry, or when you're in a place of service, because you want to say yes. Your heart wants to say yes, but there are other things that don't allow that: time, energy, maybe even alignment. I remember putting on some big events at our church and being voluntold because I'm a really good events organizer, right? So all of a sudden I'm dealing with all the events and I'm the point person. I've got all these people pulling on me, and I never even really was given the opportunity to say yes to this. I just somehow stepped into it. And, it's hard to get out of those situations, but I think we really need to be very mindful of stopping ourselves and taking the time to really articulate what it is that we want. Because if I would have gone through a process to say, yes, I will be the events coordinator for this, I would have had the overall product would have been better, but I would have wanted to contribute longer. Because I felt like I was just like throwing all of this together. There was no real plan, no mission in bringing me into this role. It was kind of like a one and done. I did this one big event and I was like, oof, this was so heavy on me. I don't know if I can continue to give in this capacity.
Mm. Yeah. And I think that sometimes, I think the point you just made about, some of us high performing women tend to get voluntold in church settings, in community organizations, whatever it is. Like people want you to sign up for the PTF and the ministry team and all these things. And we talk a lot on the podcast about like us as ourselves needing to make sure we set our boundaries and know our priorities and all that. But on the other side, as a leadership team, to look at how can we be focusing on developing a wider array of leaders and not just looking for those high performers that we know can get the job done, but we're probably going to burn them out because we're going to give them way too much to do if we're relying on just them.
So. Interestingly enough, this is not something I've necessarily been a part of creating at our church, but our church, when we sign up to volunteer, our church has us do the DISC test. And I think that it's a really good step in understanding where people's strengths are and allowing them to step into leadership roles or onto teams. It doesn't even have to be a leadership role, but now you're coupling that innate skill set with the potential opportunity that lies. And so I think there are a lot of assessments out there. I know in my business world, I use the Kolbe, Kolbe. I use that a lot in understanding how somebody works. That assessment is looking at the actual work product and how that person's cognitive abilities actually create work for them. And so that's something that's really important to me. I've seen Strength Finders, I've seen Myers-Briggs. Our church specifically uses DISC, and I think it's a really, really good effort in making sure that the right people are on the right teams.
Yeah, so good. So as we talk a little bit more about this process of hiring and then maybe talk a little bit about firing,
Mhm.
which is not fun. But what about just for the leaders out there that might be listening, and maybe they're in a workplace, maybe they have their own business, maybe they are even in the church world, but what are some of the recommendations for making that first hire? How can they kind of be prepared to bring on that first team member onto their team?
Understanding where the gaps are. I think that you had mentioned like hasty hiring a second ago, and that's something that I'm always mindful of. And it should take you like 6 to 8 weeks to bring somebody on from the beginning of creating the description and the needs, identifying the needs. But let's back up before that. As you're thinking of this may be the right time, or in the next 3 to 6 months, I would like to bring somebody onto my team. The things you need to start looking at right now is you're probably offboarding some of the things that you are currently doing right now. So I would look at the things that don't bring you joy, that are not satisfying to you, or the things that are really outside of your wheelhouse or are difficult to you. Those are always the easiest things to hand off. I personally like to make a list. I encourage the people that I work with to create a time, like every hour on the hour for 3 consecutive days. That way I know that this is work, but I promise you, if you do the work and you understand where you're spending your time, you're going to hire the person that can totally complement you. So if you never document what you're doing, I don't feel like you're ever going to write a description or have a really good direct path of filling in the gaps that you don't like doing, right? So I may be checking email, and it's just so innate in us today to hop into your email box, to hop into social media, to comment on posts, to do those things. They feel innate, but you may really not love doing those things. And there's somebody in this world who would love to receive compensation to do something that is in their zone. So I think understanding, really creating the 3 days, this is a true tactical, action-oriented step that I would like for you to do if you're looking at hiring. Take 3 days, take a good old-fashioned piece of lined notebook paper, put it next to your desk, and every hour on the hour, use that iPhone to its advantage. It's got every hour it can ding for you. Just write down what you've been doing that last hour. Now you've got a good understanding of what's happening. We do so many things. Our minds are so complex. We multitask all day long. It's going to be amazing for you to look back over those 3 days. And if you can go 5 days, excellent. If you think that your organization needs to hire, give that instruction to the person that needs the help. Have them do the 3 days. And now start to look at what the themes are. If there's administration that doesn't feel good to you, now you know that you're probably going to need an administrator. If it took you 2 hours to get in the quote zone of writing, and you are responsible for putting out an email every single week, maybe that's something that you could outsource, and someone who has the knack of hopping into that really quickly can just make that so much easier for you. So understanding truly what the needs are always going to be the best thing that I can help people set this experience up for success.
I really appreciate that, because I have been in workplaces where people have been hired as a band-aid, and 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road, it just ends really badly. And it was never really a good situation to begin with. And it just feels really upsetting all the way around. So I love that idea of really being tactical about it, and not just sort of your first thought, well, we really need a copywriter. Well, maybe you don't actually need a copywriter. Maybe you need someone specifically for social media. And even though there's a nuanced difference there, there's some difference there. If you're not really intentional about that, it can make a big difference. So I really appreciate that perspective. I'd love to talk about the other side of this. And firing, it just feels like such a horrible situation. So I'd love your perspective on how you can coach a leader to have a firing conversation that doesn't end up awful for everyone who's involved.
So firing is extremely emotional. If you've been on the giving or the receiving side, it stinks. Like it's not a fun place to be. I am 100% certain that I have been able to effectively communicate for a long period of time why this isn't working, right? So there has to be opportunities for someone to course correct, even if you know that they're probably not even capable of it. Because maybe you hired, in some of the situations that we were talking about earlier, we hire too quick. We don't exactly know what we're hiring for. We never talk about values. And so we get a mismatch from the very beginning. I think it's okay. As I said earlier, there's opportunity in every hard conversation, and there's growth on the outside, right? There's going to be growth. So even if I have to come with a hard message to someone that says, culturally, this just not working out, I could say, you're just not a good cultural fit. And they're going to feel like poop about that. If I go to them and I say, you know what are your values? And here's the organization values. And I can have a conversation that really shows and shows why this isn't working. And it's not a flaw in them. It's a flaw in the system. It's a flaw in how we brought you in here. That way, there is not a direct pointing a finger saying, you are not worthy of being here. You are not worthy of being on this team. You are only worthy of a demotion. You are only worthy of that's not it. The reality is we both have to take responsibility in this. So they're most likely they didn't hop on that team because like God picked them up and plucked them and put them there. There had to be approvals. There had to be all of these things that had to align for them to come there. So having the joint responsibility of making this work, kind of where I was going a second ago, it's a joint relationship. It has to be a joint relationship the whole time. Someone doesn't fail alone and someone doesn't succeed alone. It has come together. And so I believe that when I sit down to have these really hard conversations, I'm committed to having them and giving them a chance, but also painting the picture and being very clear and candid that this is two-sided. We have to decide collectively, do we want this? Right? And this is not marriage. We get to decide, do we want to hang? Do we want to stick around? Or can I help you start looking for another opportunity in the workplace? Is there a skill? Is there a gift that we can be working on together to set yourself up to excel somewhere else? Because I want that for you. Remember, I've given a lot of passion and depth to the relationship. And so they know from me that I want the best from them. I'm not trying to be a jerk and to leave them without income. I want them to have their best thing. And so in the time that we have together, if I can always as a leader show up as the person who is developing them, these conversations become quite easy, unfortunately, and people will self-select out.
Yeah.
A lot of times we can avoid this by having these candid conversations and saying, gosh, are you feeling that strife between us? Like, is something pulling you a little bit differently? Are you, where are you in life, in your choices, in your growth? Is this still where you want to be? Versus having to have that awful preconceived conversation of I'm going to fire you and you're out of here in 48 hours. Like that doesn't have to be. It all comes back to relationships and communication, every bit of it.
I love what you shared there. And it sounds like what you're saying is that the majority of any kind of firing situation should not come as a complete surprise to the other party, right?
Absolutely.
Because you will have been working with them to course correct, to make improvements along the way, to help them find the right place. And it's just amazing to me. I just read a post in a Facebook group the other day, and it's pastors' wives. And this pastor just out of the blue gets fired, like with zero preparation, zero, forewarning, zero opportunity to find out what they were wanting differently. And it just makes me so sad because I think that we can do better. I think we can do better in the business place, but I think we can do better in the church world too with this whole issue.
And that's usually, sometimes that's ethics, right? Like if they did something really, really that conflicts, I get the quick fire. I totally understand that. And there's a place for that. Yeah. But I think when we see that unjustly done, it's ego.
Yeah.
Somebody's inferior, somebody's threatened. And I would love to take that out of the world.
Yeah. So true. Oh, Natalie, we could talk for a long time, but I know that for the sake of time, we want to kind of wrap up. So we have a few last questions. And I just want to thank you for sharing all these insights and kind of talking through this issue of having these hard conversations and working in the workplace. And I love the theme of communication and relationships. Like if we can just boil it down to those two things are going to help avoid a lot of the challenges that we might have. So to wrap us up, we're going to go through a few fun questions for you. So we talk a lot about how God has wired us all differently on the podcast. And you already alluded to it earlier with mentioning DISC and Colby. But do you have a favorite tool that has helped you understand yourself and become a better leader?
A favorite tool. I love the Colby, but I would say even deeper than Colby, because really Colby is looking at the way that I work, but understanding me as a person and understanding that I'm not flawed and I'm not special and I am who I'm supposed to be. It's probably the Strength Finders assessment. I really liked being able to I like the shift of focusing on the positives versus the negatives, but also being able to see how I can practically apply those positive things about me. And so, I will give you a really quick example. My number one in Strengths Finders is woo, winning others over. And I was embarrassed. I was ashamed when I got that because I think, oh, that sounds like a slimy salesperson, right? It did not feel good at all. And they say, oh, like 0.2% of people have this as their number one. And I'm thinking, oh, great. Like I didn't want to, and I'm learning about this while I'm in corporate leading other people. And so it was one of those things that I attached a lot of shame to. And then once I got to understand it, like it is my special sauce. It's the whole thing that we're talking about today. It's I'm winning others over because I have the depth. And so the other ones that were under that woo were communication, positivity, discipline, achiever. Those are the things that really help me to understand who I am. So I would say I love Colby for work, but I love Strength Finders for just humans and knowing the people around me. I'm very curious about that stuff.
I like those. I was actually pleasantly surprised and a little confused at my StrengthsFinder results. So I always find that when you have a tool like that and you dig into those things even more, it just makes them so much more rich and so much more full and understanding so much more about yourself than just the cursory response that you get from those tests. So yeah, we like to dig into those things. So I would love to know what is one of your biggest leadership lessons that you've learned in your journey so far?
Be true to your values every day, all day. If you're ever feeling like you're in an icky situation, just come back to your values. It's going to help you to communicate, to lead, to soothe yourself, to have confidence in yourself. I believe that values are the deepest work that we can do as the whole human race.
Yep.
Awesome. What are some of your habits or routines that help you to be effective as a leader?
Planning for sure. I am very confident that the time that I spend quietly planning pays off for me in so many ways. I'm able to show up as the person that I want to be. Both I feel like I'm standing in integrity, but also I'm able to show up in the way that I want people to perceive me too. And I know that sounds like, ooh, perception, but it's so important for me. I don't want to be out of alignment. I don't want to show up as an organized person and really be a hot mess inside. If I get to that place, and of course I do, it always feels, it does not feel good to me. And so I feel very, very strongly in planning, knowing what my expectations of my day are and delivering those.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that you teach that in everything you do. I mean, that's one of the biggest things I've learned working with you is just taking that time to plan, whether it's for your personal life or your business or just your week ahead, your meals, whatever it might be. Doing that, it feels like it's taking more time right now, but in the long run, it saves you so much time. And
Right.
it's so, so beneficial.
And it's crazy when I sit and think about the depth of how planning affects leadership. It affects so much of it because I'm in my best space to be my best person. That's what it boils down to for me.
Yeah.
So true. I'm wondering if you could share some advice that you would give to a younger leader just starting out in ministry or career. What would you tell her?
understanding that the depth of relationship is so important. Really getting to understand people and knowing yourself first. I think that's probably, if I would go back to what I would tell my daughter or my children and my younger self, it's really be confident in who I am. Know that God made me without flaw. Know that that I'm not going to be for everybody, but I can still be a great instrument of his word, and that there is no flaw in me. Stand in my truth. Watch out for ego. Watch out for the forces that are going to try to tear you down. And just the more that I can build confidence in my own children, not human confidence. I'm saying that you are born, you were made, you were undeniably, you have what it takes to be the perfect Natalie or the perfect Esther or Holly or Emery or Zachary. We have. I'm getting teary right now just thinking about it, but we're definitely made on purpose, and we have a purpose to fulfill because we've been given that gift.
Awesome. Love it, Natalie. So, as you know, we wrap up with leaders or learners. So is there something that you have been learning lately, maybe a favorite book or podcast or resource that you would want to share with our audience?
Oh, Esther, you're the culprit behind this.
Uh-oh, what are you going to say?
This Enneagram business. So I'm a fact finder kind of person, just like Esther. I'm not sure. Holly, are you a fact finder?
No. Okay. Well, I'm a 4 on the Enneagram. I'm a big emotions.
Okay. Yes.
But do you know what you are on the Colby?
Oh, no.
You've done it. You're higher on Quick Start than Fact Finder for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's different than me.
Okay.
So whenever I get interested in a topic, it's like it just becomes my thing. And so right now, my Audible is full of all these books that Esther is recommending to me for the Enneagram. And so it's one of those things that I struggle with perfectionism, and I want to get the Enneagram right, darn it. So right now, I think that, but I know that the power in equipping myself with understanding me and understanding the people in my circle is so, so important. And that's really been what I've really been interested in the last couple of months, is just pouring extra time into knowing I'm trying to solve the riddle or solve the mystery of what I am. Am I a 1? Am I a 2? Am I a 3? Am I an 8? Like, oh, this is so much.
Yes, we've gone back and forth on that a lot.
Yes. But I think it's such a great tool. I know I've been able to type my husband, which has been very helpful. And I'm trying really hard to understand and to know what my children are.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay. So, Natalie, as we wrap up, what is the best way for people to connect with you? And if you have something you want to point them to, a resource or anything that you want them to know about, then feel free to share.
Awesome. Well, if you're following along and you're a business owner, I would definitely encourage you to check me out at theopsauthority.com. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram under that exact same name, The Ops Authority. And of course, don't miss the podcast. I think that's the best and the most rich way to connect with me. If you would like to understand your mission, vision, and values as a business, I would encourage you to go to theopsauthority.com/mission. And that's just a great tactical tool to help you kind of start getting those juices flowing, because it's a big, I mean, once you get that tackled, I believe business becomes a lot easier.
Yeah.
And ladies, thank y'all so much for having me. I could sit here and talk all day long. You two are just such beautiful souls. And I'm so glad that I have been a part of Esther's life for a while now, but I love that, just seeing her evolution and the power that the two of you guys bring together to help educate. And I listen to you guys all the time, and I love the guests that you're bringing on. And so I know you weren't expecting that, but you guys are such a gift. And I speak on behalf of all the listeners that we just appreciate you bringing together such a dedicated topic, you being so dedicated to the topic, and just really helping us as leaders just continue to move forward in what we're doing.
Thanks for joining us on the Christian Women Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, come and join us in our private Facebook community. We would love to get to know you better so that we can make sure the podcast is providing what you need. Plus, you can share your questions and ideas, and you'll be surrounded by incredible Christian women leaders. To join the group, visit estherlittlefield.com/group. Now, don't forget, your leadership matters. and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.